I'll start with Massimo. He is a philosopher of science at the City University of New York. He has published in national magazines such as Skeptic, Skeptical Inquirer, Philosophy Now, and the Philosopher's Magazine, among others. He has also been elected a Fellow of the Committee of Skeptical Inquiry. Pigliucci pens the Rationally Speaking blog at rationallyspeaking.org, hosts the podcast by the same name, and publishes the 5-minute philosopher videos on YouTube. Professor Pigliucci has published 12 technical and public outreach books, most recently Nonsense on Stilts, How to Tell Science from Bunk. Benjamin Radford is one of the world's few science-based paranormal investigators and has done first-hand research into mysterious phenomena in 16 countries on 4 continents, including psychics, ghosts, and haunted houses, exorcisms, miracles, Bigfoot, stigmata, lake monsters, UFO sightings, reincarnation, and crop circles, and many other topics. He's also the deputy editor of Skeptical Inquirer Science Magazine, a research fellow with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, author, board game creator, and film director. I would like you to please welcome Ben Radford.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for coming out on this slightly drizzly evening here. I know there's other things you could be doing in Manhattan because I've been doing some of them the last couple of days, and I'm glad you all came out for this. So, I will be discussing, as she mentioned, psychic detectives. It's a topic that I've written about extensively and researched quite a bit in the last 12, 15 years or so in my work with the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. And I want to begin by sort of laying out what some of the basic definitions are, because there tends to be some confusion about what is a psychic, what do they really claim to do, and what are they. So let me begin by just starting out with, well, what are psychic detectives? Well, basically, they're people who claim to offer information typically about missing people, either trying to locate a missing person, for example, in a missing persons case, an abduction case, or perhaps a homicide case. A person's gone missing in the family, and of course, the police want to find the missing person. It's basically a variation on the issue of psychic powers, because not all people who claim to be psychic are psychic detectives, sort of the subgenre of the psychic crowd, and it's basically a variation on talking to the dead and psychometry. Talking to the dead, of course, we're all familiar with. People for a long time have believed they're talking to the dead. I think of, for example, the quote from I think it's Henry IV, where one of the person says, "Well, I can call spirits from the vasty deep," and I think it's Glendower says, "Well, so can I, or so can any man, but do they come when you call them?" That's the question. The question isn't, are you talking to the dead? Because we can all talk to the dead. I can talk to my dead grandfather. The question is, are you getting responses back? Are you getting information back from beyond the grave? And the other element of this is what's called psychometry, and this is basically the claimed ability to read impressions or intuitions from objects. Oftentimes, a psychic detective will say, well, please give me the missing person's watch or jewelry or piece of clothing or something that they were connected to in some way. And they say that they can get, they sometimes hold them close, and they concentrate, and they will come up with visions that they are saying coming through. Sometimes it will be things that happened in the person's past. Sometimes it'll be where the person is now. For example, again, if the person is missing, they'll say, I'm connecting with this missing person, and she is near water, or she's in a cold place, or something like that. They'll give these details. And there tends to be a pattern to the psychic detective. They're basically their modus operandi. The pattern is that there's a disappearance, time passes, and there's publicity, and then psychic detectives will basically sort of come out of the woodwork to offer their impressions. They're most common in high-profile missing persons cases. Every now and then there will be like a local case, in which the psychics will come out. But for the most part, what happens is that psychics, along with the rest of us, will hear about a missing persons case. Natalie Holloway, for example, or Holly Bobo from Tennessee. Some of you may remember that case a little over a year ago. And it's all over the news because, of course, the family is desperate, and the police are desperate because they're not solving the case. They're not finding the missing person. And what will happen is that the psychics will often offer information to either the family and or the police and say, I think I'm connecting with her. I had a dream last night. I had a vision, and here's my information. The problem is that this happens in droves. In some cases, dozens, in some cases, hundreds, in some cases, thousands of psychics offer their information, and usually it's contradictory. It would be one thing if the psychic information was the same. If we had 5, 6, a dozen different psychics who were all using the psychic powers that they really believe they have and saying, look, this is where this missing person is, and the police, oh my God, well, I've got 3 different people who don't know each other, different parts of the country, they're all saying that we should look, by the East River or by here or by there. That's not what happens at all. And so there's actually about a half dozen or so sort of brand name psychic detectives. There is Noreen Rainier, Sylvia Browne, I should say convicted felon Sylvia Browne. This is one of her books, Visits from the Afterlife. She's very, very popular. Montel Williams has her on, or had her on as much as he could, as did Larry King. Couldn't get enough of her. Every chance that they got, anytime there's dead air, she's like, get Sylvia, we need Sylvia in here. Because, of course, she entertains people, and they love that. There's also Alison Dubois, and the TV show Medium. We watch it. It's now off the air, but it ran on NBC for I think 3 or 4 years. There's Carla Baron, who's a famous psychic detective in California, around Los Angeles. And there also happens to be almost all of them, interestingly, are women and gay men, for whatever reason. I'm serious. Almost all women. And now you can say, there's different theories about that. The one that I think is most likely is it's a matter of empathy and sympathy. Is that women may tend to be more sympathetic, not only towards the family, the missing persons, but the police, and they may just sort of feel that they're giving information. But again, there's about a half dozen or dozen or so name ones. They're on TV a lot. There's lots of true TV shows, I think formerly known as Court TV. There's all sorts of shows that are on that. I've actually been on a couple of the TV shows investigating psychics. And I can talk a little bit about that. Now, one thing that people need to understand, I get this question a lot. People say, well, but the question that I get is, do police listen to psychics? And the answer is, yes, they do. And this puzzles people. Like, well, hold on here, but you're sounding skeptical of this whole psychic thing, but why do the police listen to psychics? Well, the answer, of course, is that the police cannot afford to ignore any information at all from anybody. If there's a missing persons case, if a young woman's gone missing, or there's a homicide or an abduction, there's no way for police to know who's giving what information. They can't just randomly, willy-nilly, arbitrarily decide, well, I'm not going to listen to this person, I'm going to listen to that person. Police have to follow up on every credible lead. Now, obviously, if someone comes to them and says, I saw this missing person abducted by UFO last night, they will kindly get shown the door. But if someone just says, I get this feeling, or I get this sense, or I really can't tell you, but this is what I think happened, the police have to follow up on these things. So in that respect, many police do listen to psychics. That doesn't mean that they believe them. It doesn't mean that when they follow up on their information, it gets them anywhere. It just means that that's part of standard police procedural. Picture what would happen if, let's say, for example, a person who claimed to be psychic had insider information about a crime, and they didn't want to come forth as to how they knew this. Maybe they were part of the crime, maybe their husband or their brother, or maybe they committed the crime, or were part of it. And they go to the police sort of under the cloak of anonymity saying, well, I just had this psychic vision that you might find this information. So there may be reasons why a person might claim to be psychic and be giving actual, valid, accurate information, that isn't coming through psychic abilities. And imagine for a second what would happen if it later turned out that police ignored this. If there was a missing woman and it later turned out the police said, no, we're not going to listen to this person, and that person was right, oh my God, heads would roll. Instead, what you have is you have people who are giving information to police and who are trying to sort of oftentimes ingratiate themselves into the investigation. Sometimes they do it for money. Oftentimes they do it pro bono. They do it just out of the goodness of their heart. However, out of the goodness of their heart also means, please make sure that anybody you talk to knows that I'm working with you. I actually got an email just last week from a guy whose girlfriend, I think her name was Robin Gardner. She'd gone missing in Aruba. In weird similarities with the Natalie Holloway case, actually. And he emailed me last week, and he wanted to know what I knew about Carla Baron, a California psychic that I mentioned earlier, and I said that I'd done some investigation about her. And he said, well, I just want you to know that I had experiences with her. And he said that what happened in his particular case is that he said, Carla didn't contact us directly. She had one of her minions was his word, but had one of the people that really believed in her, was basically on her side, contact them saying, Carla can help you out with this if you want. So it's not like Carla Baron, who actually had a TV show called Haunting Evidence on, I think that ran for 2-3 years on True TV, in which she and 2 other people looked at cold cases. That was the premise of the whole TV show, is they were going to go and look at cold cases, active homicide and missing person cases, and try and solve the cases. I later went through and analyzed how many cases they solved after 3 years, and the answer is 0. Not a single one. And I actually brought this up along with one of her co-hosts at a public panel at DragonCon, which is a big nerd fest in Atlanta that I go to. There's a skeptics track there, and one of her co-hosts, Patrick Burns, a nice guy, was there, and I said, Patrick, can you explain to us how, with the help of 2 psychics investigating these cases, you didn't solve a single case in 3 years? He's like, well, we're not perfect. And I go, I will leave. Okay, I'll grant you that. So anyway, he was telling me about his experience with Carla Baron. He said, look, that she basically ingratiated herself into the investigation. He didn't ask for her help. And what he told me was that her main interest was making sure that he told he told the world in press conferences that Carla Baron was helping her out. Carla Baron is involved in this. She's doing all this. So from his point of view, again, I wasn't there. I'm just telling you what he said. He said that her whole motivation was press. It was publicity. She didn't really care about finding Robin, who to this day is still missing. Her thing was get my name in the paper. So that's one reason why these people often ingratiate themselves into these crimes. In these missing person cases, sometimes they do it for money. There's been many cases that I've investigated where a psychic will say, well, tell you what, I can help you out. I just need, I need to come into your house, I need airfare. You live in Tennessee, I live in California. If you pay my airfare, put me up for a couple days and, whatever else. And when, let's not talk money. This is kind of crude because your daughter's missing after all. So, but, we can work something out here. This actually happens fairly common. So what's amazing about psychic detectives in my research is that they have this spectacular, remarkable track record of failure. It is, and I'm not being. It is amazing how often they're wrong. It's almost like beyond chance. You couldn't expect them to be wrong this often, and yet, if you read these books, if you read books by Sylvia Browne, you read here's one by the Psychic Case Files by Tony Stockwell. And there's dozens of these. These are just a random handful off my shelf. These are in bookstores. These are in libraries. They're everywhere. If you read their side of the story, it's like, oh my God, I solved these cases, I'll solve that cases, and they're full of testimonials. I'll give you a quick example on that. Going back to Alison Dubois, who was the inspiration for the TV show Medium that I mentioned earlier that ran on NBC for I think 3 or 4 years. When that first came out, I went to the NBC website because somebody alerted me and said, hey, I know you research psychics. You should be aware there's this new TV show that's based on a true story, supposedly, from Alison Dubois. And the TV show began with, "There really isn't Alison. Really." That was their tagline. And I went to the NBC website to find out more about the show. And it said on the website, when it gave the biography of the woman that the show was based on, the true story, is that she solved all these crimes and she has these visions, this and that. And furthermore, this was validated by the fact that she had solved crimes for and worked with the Glendale Police Department, she's in Arizona, and also the Texas Rangers. So I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, interesting. So I called up the Texas Rangers, and they said they'd never worked with her. They said, no, we never worked with psychic, and we certainly haven't worked with Alison Dubois. I don't know where your information is coming from. I'm like, well, the NBC website, but whatever, right? So then I said, okay, so I'm making note. I took a note of the person. Then I called the Glendale Police Department, and I said, this woman claims that she's solving crimes for you, whatever else. I said, have you heard of her? She said, and the spokeswoman said, we have heard of her because people keep calling to ask us whether we've heard of her. And the answer is no, we've never worked with her. I can patch you through to the detectives, the homicide detectives. They've never worked with her. The only reason they've heard of her is because people keep, having to deny the fact that this goes on. Now, there's an interesting rejoinder to this. So I'm getting these quotes from these people. And again, I'm not making this up. I'm simply following up on the information on the website. So I called the press spokesperson for NBC. And I said, you might want to know that apparently your star has lied to you about her resume. There's been some fudging going on here because, on your website it claims that she solved all these crimes and that these police departments can back her up. And first she said, well, NBC has tens of thousands of employees. We can't vet each one. I'm like, no. This is the star of your show. This is the person that your show is based upon. This is not the janitor down the street. This isn't the guy that does the accounting. This is. And she's like, well. So then after all, she's like, I don't think I like your attitude. I said, well, I don't like your attitude either. I'm trying to do you a favor. I said, I'm actually I was then the managing editor of the magazine. I said, just so you know, I'm going to be mentioning this in the next issue of the magazine. And it can either be on your website when it comes out or not. I don't care. Oddly enough, the next week it was gone from the NBC website. The show still went on, but the part about her bona fides for solving crimes mysteriously vanished. I don't know what to tell you. But the question then becomes, well, what do you count as success? Because again, oftentimes they're giving all this information about psychics and missing persons, whatever else. What is a success? Well, the way I define success would be psychic information that specifically leads a person, whether it's a family member or a police officer or a searcher, to a body. That's what I'm talking about. Something that gets results. Not vague, general, maybe the body will be found near water, maybe she's scared, she's alive. We need things that are actually helpful. And oftentimes what you find is that when you look at the sorts of claims that are made by psychic detectives regarding missing persons, is they don't make predictions, they make post-dictions. It's the same thing with Nostradamus. When Nostradamus is writing his prophecies, he's talking about all this, and people to this day, there's dozens and dozens and hundreds of books on Nostradamus and all his psychics and visions and all his accurate predictions. But when you actually read what happens, when you look at the phenomena, is that he doesn't predict anything. What happens is that an event happens, and then people go back and read into it, and they say, well, look, it fits. See, this event happened, and if you look, in this one sentence here, that could match that. And the answer is yeah, it could if you want to tweak some meanings around. The point is that he didn't predict that. If Nostradamus predicted the 9/11 attacks, we would know about it before 9/11. It wouldn't be brought up to our attention 3 months later on a website. Oh, by the way, if you reread this, Nostradamus was talking about, no, bullshit. This is not how this works. That's not a prediction at all. That's you, after the fact, going back and trying to see what of the circumstances, after we know the outcome, which of these things that someone mentioned can be construed as relevant to the outcome. And the exact same thing happens with psychic detectives, where they'll give information about a missing person, and it's typically very vague. It's general. Again, I mentioned earlier, body found near water. This is like classic. This is typical. This is exactly what people do. They say, body will be found near water. Well, most bodies are found near water, unless you're like in the desert somewhere. I mean, and even then, I mean, what is near water? Is that a river? Is that a stream? Is that an ocean? Is that a lake? Is that a culvert? Is that a ditch? Is it a water tower? And what is near? Does that a bathtub? I mean, think about this. There's all these weasel words, right? Near water. Is near 20 feet? Is it 20 miles? What? Yeah, take a bottle of Evian. Take your pick. Or, for example, I'll tell you one case where I was actually following up on a case where the psychic had said the body would be found near wood or near like organic shrubbery. I'm thinking, okay, well that's again other than in the middle of the desert. But the important thing was it would be found near the color white. So I'm thinking, okay, white, picket fence, the body's wearing white, there's a styrofoam cup nearby. What the hell does that mean? And I asked the psychic, I said, I don't mean to rain on your parade here, but I'm just trying to figure out because they found the body, it was nowhere near white. He says, well, no, it was about 3 or 4 miles from a road. I said, yeah. I said, there's a white stripe on the road. I'm like, really? Really now? You're going to the white stripe on the road? All right, if that's as specific as you can get, that it might be somewhere near a white stripe on a road, fine, I will grant you that. Good job, well done. This is part of the problem, is that even if this information is accurate, it's worthless. It is not useful. It does not help people find the bodies. If it did, then we would be finding the bodies. I'll give you one example. Actually, this is kind of a fun little story. Do you guys remember the well, it's not fun, it's tragic, but it's an interesting, it's an enlightening story. The Holly Bobo, a woman who's been gone missing like a year and 3 months now from Tennessee. Okay, well, in a nutshell, it was a woman, a young Tennessee woman named Holly Bobo. She's actually the cousin of a country star, country music star who's helping publicize the case. She was forced into the woods. She was last seen forced into the woods near her Tennessee home. She's a young blonde nursing student. Of course, the media is more if you're a young, attractive blonde girl, the media is like, oh my God, this is important. If you're like a minority or a male, it's like, well, we'll get around to it eventually. Whatever. But so there's that media bias. But in this particular case, this woman was abducted, and it made national. It was a big deal about it. And so what I did was, this actually happened as I was finishing another psychic detective investigation. And so as part of my investigation into the Holly Bobo case, I went on to, I was actually contacted by several psychics who were criticizing me for a previous piece I wrote. And it just so happened that right at that time, the Holly Bobo went missing. And I said, here's a perfect example. I said, this woman just went missing like several days ago. If you can do this, where is she? I said, you can criticize, you can say that I was wrong about some earlier case, whatever else. This is real life. This woman is missing as of right now. This happened 2 days ago. You claim to be psychic. You claim to be part of a whole network of psychics. This is your chance. Find the woman. Tell us where she is. Contact the police. Let's get this thing solved. And she's like, well, we'll work on it. She says, you should come to our website and look at the information that's being given. I said, okay. Here's an example. This is taken directly from a, I think it was called psychicforums.net. I'll just read you quickly the example of the sorts of information that was given about Holly Bobo, where her location was, and her abductor. Condensed from about probably 40 or 50 different psychics who are all giving different information. The man who abducted Bobo is white with dark brown or salt and pepper hair, a full and shaggy mustache, and has dark brown eyes. He's in his early 30s, around 5 feet 11 inches, weighing 210 pounds. That's pretty specific. He has a nasty rash on his elbow. He is older than Bobo, a Scorpio, and the relative of Bobo's boyfriend, or the father of an ex-boyfriend. Bobo was abducted in a red truck with bales of hay in the back and is being held captive and raped at his victimizer's home about 20 miles north of Nashville in a log cabin about 26 to 30 minutes north of where she was abducted. Bobo's abductor makes a lot of mistakes and will be captured within 5 days. This prediction was made about 2 days after her abduction. She's still missing. Another psychic said, I'm getting a B like Bob. I feel west, or 7th, or just 7. A green truck. He may have had a weapon, a gun probably. I also got the feeling that she may have casually met him somewhere but didn't really know him. Her abductor is scrawny, or medium build, blondish hair, little social skills, a country boy. He might have a bite mark on his hand. I feel that she may be alive and very scared in a house. Something that sounds like mango and then mandarin. I have no idea what that means. Then I heard Rob or Bob, but then that might be a name or similar sounding name. She may be held about 20 minutes away where she was abducted. Then one other woman, a tarot reading blogger who goes by the name of Empathy, wrote actually 2,000 words on this, so I had to condense this quite a bit. People or something with the names B or J might be useful. There may be a building on the other side of the water. It seems to be a lack of faith or energy in finding Holly, as though some people don't want her to be found. The 10 of Wands suggests she could be found under 10 weeks. It just goes on and on here. It may or may not, her disappearance may or may not be associated with people with the initials B, J, or M, or W. There may or may not be some association with a building near a stream or a lake or a river. She might be found to the north, south, or this is interesting. She might be found either to the north or south. Not of anything, just the north or south. Not of where she's abducted, not from any specific place, just the north or south. Of course, anywhere where she'll eventually be found will be north or south of somewhere. She may be inside or just outside of a town, but some buildings. It's just amazing. So I wrote this up, and then a couple days later, I got a letter from a lawyer. This is the fun part. Benjamin Radford, copyright infringement. Our client, the operator of PsychicCrimeFighter.com, has observed an article entitled Psychics Offer Tips in Search for the Missing Woman. By the way, I wrote this piece for Discovery News, so that it got out there. And actually, I was actually trying to be helpful here because this is psychic information that can presumably help this woman. It contains material that is identical or substantially similar to our client's copyrighted work, blah, 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 cease and desist, we're going to sue your ass. We demand you receive your written confirmation of compliance by the close of business day. My response, Dear Adrian, and thank you and lawyer Ambremer for your letter. Regarding the material in question, I believe you'll find it's covered under fair use doctrine, which specifically allows the use of copyrighted material for the purpose of commentary, news reporting, teaching, etc. My column containing the material appeared on a clearly labeled news website as commentary and news reporting. If you have any further questions, please look up copyright law. I can't be bothered to do that for you. I should also add that I find it curious that your client would object to the dissemination of materials and information that she believes may help save the life of a young woman. Thank you very much, Ben Radford. So there you go. So I'm trying to put out information. Now, I'm not saying that I believe it. I'm just telling the world what these psychics are saying, who's going to help solve this case. And they're threatening to sue me because I'm telling the world what they're saying, who's abducting this. So this is what happens. So again, you can look at track records of missing persons cases. I've done this over and over. I'll just give you a couple examples. It's basically a laundry list. Elizabeth Smart. I'll go a couple old cases, a couple new cases. Elizabeth Smart, last seen June 5th, 2002 from Salt Lake City. I'm sure most of you remember that case. Over 1,000 psychics offered information about Elizabeth Smart. That was the girl that was abducted and unfortunately raped and was later found after 10 months when 2 alert Salt Lake City couples recognized her. They were just walking down the street. She'd actually been abducted by a guy named, I think, Brian Warner and his wife, and they were basically this cult guy, and just this horrific scene. And police had actually questioned her earlier, and she was forced to pretend like she was his daughter. And two Salt Lake City couples walking down the street said, "That's the missing girl on the news," and they called the cops. So this woman, thankfully, was recovered, not through any psychic abilities, but through basically police work. Chandra Levy, back in 2001, Washington, D.C. intern. There was Gary Condit was dragged into this because he was having an affair with her. There was some insinuation that he contributed to her death. That later turned out to be not true. Over 1,000 psychics, including convicted felon Sylvia Browne, gave information about that. She was convicted of fraud, actually. Interestingly enough, Sylvia Browne, she went with the old standby on Chandra's case. She said that she'd be found near standing water. Unfortunately, Chandra was actually found on a hill. Now, I don't know how your knowledge of geography is, but you can't have like a marshy area on a hill because it runs down. So she's completely wrong about that, and of course, they didn't find her. Brooke Wilberg, Lori Hacking, Lacey Peterson, another famous case, of course, the Scott Peterson, the big case in California. Over 200 psychics commented on that case. She was found 5 months later by passersby in San Francisco Bay. Natalie Holloway, woman missing in Aruba since 2005. Dozens of psychics have offered information about her. Whoa, spooky. I'll just leave it there. And again, still missing to this day. And I mean, I can go on and on and on here. I mean, I collect these. This is part of what I do. And to me, the most horrific ones, the ones that really piss me off, are the cases, for example, of J.C. Dugard, the girl that was abducted in California off the streets and held it was actually a husband and wife, in the backyard. She was repeatedly raped for, as I recall, nearly 20 years. Over and over. She actually had two daughters by her abductor. And I'm thinking, well, hold on here. This girl is snatched off the streets. There's all these psychic detectives in California, across the country, who claim to be able to solve crimes, find missing persons. Where the hell were they? Where were they where she was being abused and raped? If they can do this, why aren't they solving these crimes? Why aren't they finding these people? Why is it that when these missing persons are finally found, it's often through police work, it's through by accident, and oftentimes when the person's dead, frankly, a lot of times it's just found by random passersby. This is sort of one little known fact about missing persons cases, that if the police don't find the person, usually within 48, 72 hours, they're not going to find them for a long time, and usually the police won't find them at all. Somebody walking their dog in a park will find them. Someone looking for a turtle. In the Chandra Levy case, Chandra Levy's body was found by a guy looking for turtles in a D.C. park. So again, who is finding these missing persons? It's not psychics, and frankly, a lot of times, it's not even police. It's people like you and me who just happen to be going by a place where the psychic never told anybody to go look. So there's other cases like that, and so again, I'll be talking with Massimo some, and there'll be maybe some time for Q&A. So there's still more to talk about there. So I don't want to give it all away, but you know. This is nothing new here. This is nothing that you all can't test yourself. Check it yourself. The next time there's a high-profile missing persons case, watch the news. Don't take my word for it. Watch the news. Some person's missing, some little girl's missing. Just watch the news, see what happens, see if, in fact, when and if the body is found, either alive or dead or whatever else, see how the person was found. Was it like in Elizabeth Smart's case, found by a person like you or me, happened to notice the person? Was it somebody, or was it a psychic detective who said, I can use my powers, I can tell you where the person is, follow me. I'll tell you where to go. Here it is. And again, a lot of times, they're all over the case. In Chandra Levy's case, the police said that, they're just getting, and again, the higher the profile of the case, the national news, psychics are coming from all over the place. If it's a local missing persons case or a local homicide, it's only going to get local attention, regional attention. So 1 or 2 psychics live in the area might do that. It gets on national news. Oh my God, the police and the family are being inundated from all across the country, sometimes other countries, Europe, Australia, by people who are claiming to have visions. Now, I need to tell you that most of the time, they really believe that they have these powers. Most of the psychics that I've met are sincere, genuine, honest people. They're good people. I've met many of them. They're wonderful, empathic people. The problem is, it's not that they're hoaxers, it's not that they're liars, it's that they can't do what they claim to do, and they certainly can't do it to scientific standards. Now, one issue that comes up, and I mentioned going back to the Alison Dubois case, where the Texas Rangers and the Glendale police said, we don't work with her. Oftentimes what happens is the psychics, they invoke a conspiracy theory. If you confront them, you say, well, hold on here. Hold the phone. Your website and your book, it says that you solved all these cases, but when we actually talk to the police, they say that's not true. They say that they actually solved these cases, and you may have given information, but that information didn't lead anywhere. Their answer is interesting. It's, they don't want you to know that. The police don't want to admit, the FBI doesn't want to admit that they're using psychics. The local police, CIA, whatever else, they use us all the time, but they don't want to give us credit. First of all, I'm thinking, if you do this routinely, why would you keep doing it if you're not getting credit for it? Second of all, it just doesn't make sense. If you really can find this person, if you know where these people are, talk to the local newspaper. Go to them first and say, I'm sensing something, you can find the body here. Get it in print. No one's going to doubt that, it's right there. Then go to the police, and then when the police find the body, the police can't take the credit from you because you've told everybody what your information is. So it just doesn't make sense. Again, they have to invoke this conspiracy theory to explain why it is that they're not doing this. So one question comes up is, why is it that in the face of such continual failure, why do so many people believe that psychic detectives are valid? There's a couple reasons for that. One of them is that the claims of psychic detectives are rarely refuted. There's a handful of us that do this. James Randi has done it a lot. Gary Posner, a skeptic in Tampa Bay, Florida. I work on it. There's a handful of other people, other skeptics out there doing this sorts of investigations and research. But for the most part, there's very, very few people who are actually investigating the claims of these psychic detectives. Why would the average person do that? It's not something that would, it's not something that you would necessarily come up and, I'm going to investigate. I'm going to call up the Texas Rangers to find out whether what Alison Dubois said is true or not. It's just not something that would cross your radar unless you're researching it, unless you're taking it seriously and doing it. Another reason is, of course, we have TV shows. You have Larry King, Montel Williams, Court TV, all these different shows that love to pander to all these psychics, and a lot of people they think that what's on TV is real. It's amazing. Even in today's day and age, I'm like, seriously? You just because it's on TV, you're like, oh yeah. There was a case. I won't summarize. Maybe we can get into it later if you're interested. But I actually investigated what was called the best case for psychic detectives. I wrote about it in my book, Scientific Paranormal Investigation. I actually have 2 copies here if anyone's interested. But I wrote it. It's like chapter 7 in the book, and it's actually the best case ever offered to me as evidence for psychic detectives. It took me 18 months to investigate. It actually involved several police officers. It was a case in New Jersey, actually. It was a serial killer. And again, I won't go into the whole case, it's kind of long and involved, but there was a psychic who claimed that she gave accurate information to 2 police detectives about a serial killer in 1982 New Jersey. The interesting thing here is that both cops kind of backed her up on this. In the TV show, both police officers appeared on camera saying that basically she was right. So that was kind of a tough case to crack. But again, I eventually solved it, and it took 18 months. But the point here is that most people don't have that kind of interest in spending 18 months or wasting their time on it for 18 months in order to follow up on the truth of these things. And sometimes you also have gullible police. I've investigated several cases where where there'll be a missing persons case or a psychic detective case, and I'll notice that there's a police chief or a sergeant quoted as saying, "Yeah, she really gave us cool information or important information." I'm like, wow, I wonder if he was quoted correctly. Sometimes they're not quoted correctly. Sometimes journalists will just sort of, spice it up to have a story. Other times, I talk to the person like, yeah, the psychic really helped. I said, okay, I'm looking through the case. I'm like, how did the psychic help? Well, when we found the body, some of it turned out to be right. I'm like, no, this is not how this works. This is not, if her information was useful to you, then you could get that information, use that information to find the missing person. That's what useful information is. It is of no use to later, after the body has been found, to tell the family, oh, I told you it might be near something red. That doesn't help. Doesn't help anybody. Doesn't help police. Doesn't help the families of the missing persons. It is of no use at all. And yet, to some police officers and sergeants, it's all, well, but she convinced me. I mean, she gave information that turned out to be right. And I have to explain to this, and there's one particular case I'm thinking of where, it's kind of embarrassing. I have to explain to a police sergeant why this is faulty logic. And of course he's like, well, I'm a police sergeant. I'm like, well, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. So anyway, that's part of the reason why there's such belief in the abilities of psychics. Number one, psychics don't publicize their failures. If you read, all the examples that Sylvia Browne gives in here are, according to her, amazing successes that couldn't have been solved any other way. She doesn't tell you about all the cases that she completely failed on. I could talk about the Sean Hornbrett case. Maybe some of you know that case. But again, remember that they're only giving you one side of the story. You look on their websites; they're making claims about having solved for all these cases for all these police departments and law enforcement agencies, and a lot of them turn out to be completely false. But most people don't bother to follow up on that, and so because of that, you have this continual barrage of information, media, the psychics themselves, and other people, and again, occasionally with the help of police officers who are essentially endorsing the psychics. Why wouldn't you believe this if you're not thinking terribly critically about it? So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up because I'm going to have some more conversation with Massimo.
So there are so many obvious questions that I'm going to just pick for a few.
Okay. I like the obvious ones because those are the easiest.
There you go.
We can go for the less obvious ones afterwards.
Okay, maybe over wine.
There you go.
So the first thing is it you've done this for a number of years. Is it your
Yes.
impression that the majority of these people are conscious charlatans, or do they actually believe what they're saying?
In my experience, the majority of psychics in general, including psychic detectives, really believe what they're saying. To them, it's a personal thing. They sometimes they'll tell me of watching a TV show and seeing a news story about a missing person, and that night they have a vision, and they're like, I thought about this girl, and I pictured her in the woods somewhere. And I don't doubt that. I really don't. I don't think they're lying to me. The problem is that just because you have a vision doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean that it's a sign from God or anything else. It just means that you thought about it afterwards. And so, and the other issue is that they fool themselves because again, what happens is that they'll give information that turns out to be right, and they're like, I was right. The body was near water. I told you that it would be near a number 7, and Highway 77 is only 20 miles away. And no, sir, and I'm like, I understand. I mean, I'm looking him straight in the eye. I'm like, I understand that. You need to understand that telling me that there's a 7 involved doesn't mean anything. Telling me that telling me after the fact that if you find the body, it may be near something having to do with 7 is worthless. And I understand that. They're not to belabor it, but part of it is that they're very. When I question their results, it is seen as a personal attack,
right?
Because they're invested. They're like, I'm a psychic. I have this ability. I'm helping people. I want to help people out. And if I say I understand that. I'm not calling you a liar, but you need to understand that this is not right. That is a personal attack on them. It doesn't matter how much I try to couch it and say, look, I'm not attacking you. I'm just saying, if you look at it from a more skeptical point of view, you realize that this is going on.
Right. But so that brings me to the obvious second question, which is how do they deal with failures? So I've had occasional experience of investigating paranormal phenomena, for instance, dowsing. And one time we did this really simple experiment where this guy was claiming that he could find water with a rod made of wood, and so we simply set up a bunch of buckets. Some of them were empty, some of them had water. We checked with him that when he could see the water, sure enough, the thing was working. When he couldn't see, when he saw that there was no water, the thing wasn't working. Then we randomized.
Funny
them.
how that works. Yeah.
We covered them, and then he said, "Okay, now find the 50% with water," and he got exactly about a half right and half wrong, as you would expect by chance. So we told him and say, "Okay, so how do you explain the fact that for all effective purposes you failed?" And you could almost see his brain going into defense mode immediately. And of course, the first defense that he came up with was that that's because the skeptics were producing this negative energy.
Right.
That was,
blame the skeptics. I get that a lot. Yeah.
Right. So you blame this. That's the ultimate thing, right? You can blame the skeptic. Therefore, there's no way somebody can investigate. But what I'm getting at is that there must be cases where it's going to be more difficult to rationalize. Right, your failure. So if I claim that I can fly, and you say, well, okay, jump off the window, I probably can rationalize only one attempt if I survive it, and that's about it. Right.
Make it a low
But in these
window.
cases, on the other hand, it's much easier. And that is that because their predictions are in fact so vague that for all effective purposes, they themselves can believe that they have.
Typically, yes.
Right.
I mean, it's remarkable because I'll point to people like you failed. None of your information helped recover this person. It was found by a maintenance worker. How do you explain that? And they're like, yeah, but I was right. I was right. Damn it! And they get frustrated with me. It's like, why don't I understand that some of their information was right? It's like we're just coming at this from very different perspectives, and to them, they have nothing to rationalize because they didn't fail. Even in the case of Natalie Holloway, Carla Baron, the psychic that I mentioned in California, to this day she claims to have solved that case. And I'm like, Carla, they don't know where her body is. No one has been found. No one has been tried for her.
So what does she mean by solved?
She means that that she gave information to police that she believes is accurate.
Okay.
That's what she means by solved.
So it's like
that is her criterion. Yes.
So it's the same kind of defense as I did not have sex with that woman because it depends on what you mean by sex.
Right.
And
depends on what is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Now, you mentioned that Sylvia Browne now is being convicted of fraud.
No, this was a long time ago.
Long time ago, right? Now,
And hopefully once more.
Well, the question is, shouldn't there be a consumer protection laws against charlatans? Are there?
Well, that's interesting. That's actually one of my interests is looking at where law meets psychic abilities, and to that extent, I've looked into, for example, fortune-telling laws. And it's really fascinating because different regions have different laws against fortune-telling or prognostication. Typically, what they do is they offer for entertainment purposes only. So they frame it as if don't believe anything I'm saying, but if you really want to do this. And part of the problem, I mean, you can even look at look at on Wall Street. Look at what happened in the financial meltdown. You had credit raters, Standard & Poor's, who were offering their presumably rock hard opinions on how good stocks were, calling AA ratings. And when they're called before Congress to explain, well, how is it that you gave these companies AA ratings right before they went in the toilet? It was our opinion. We didn't. That's our opinion. We have a First Amendment right to state our opinion. It doesn't matter that we were presenting it as fact, as researched fact. It's not relevant. So their point of view is we can say whatever we want to. It's our opinion, and in some cases that's exactly what psychics do.
Right, but see It's interesting you brought up Wall Street because one of my next questions.
Oh, good. See, I'm psychic.
An analogy.
I'm like, I know where he's going with this.
You're psychic. I mean, if we're talking about an industry that has a bad record of predictions, that is in fact the stock analysis industry. Despite all the prevalence of TV personalities who tell you where to invest your money, as it turns out, when people look at the data, the chances that these people actually can consistently beat the market or make predictions that are reliable in the long term are actually close to zero. And of course, the modus operandi there is in fact somewhat similar to that of a psychic, because the way it works is, I'm going to predict that the market is going to crash this year. I also predicted it last year, and 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 4 years ago. And sure enough, one of these days, the market is going to crash. And if when it does, I jump up and say, see, I predicted that it was going to crash, people forget the other 10 years that I made the same prediction because I didn't remark on it, and then the game is done. And from then on, I'm an expert.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what psychics do. I mean, they'll. I mean, I've had cases where someone will say, well, yeah, but look at this. I said this body would be found, somewhere near there, and they give me a couple different criterion, and I'll go back and say, yeah, but you were interviewed by the police for 40 minutes. You can only pick 3 things out of that 40-minute interview. It's like, how many things are you telling me that? How many predictions do you make that you're not telling me because you failed? They don't. It's really impressive if you suggest to somebody that I got 3 out of 5 predictions about this person right. It's a little impressive if the actual number of predictions they made was 30 or 60. It's like, well, hold on here. Yeah, I'm impressed with your 3. What about the other 57 of these?
But what fascinates me is this idea of the freedom of speech that people have, because it doesn't really seem to apply fairly across the board. If I go to my doctor and my doctor says, you have a cancer, and it turns out it's not right, I can actually sue the doctor for malpractice, or vice versa if he tells me that I don't have the chronic cancer and I do have it. I don't think the doctor defense is honestly going to be flying if he says, well, that was my opinion.
Freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want.
Speech, right? So why is it that we do not apply the same kind of standard to these kind of things? I mean, do you have any...
It's a great question. I mean, I obviously think that we should. I mean, that's, to my mind, that would be the criterion here. Would be, is it effective? Is it accurate? Is it true? And furthermore, can you prove it? I think that part of it is because it's such a nebulous subject. There's this sort of like, well, it's entertainment. I don't see how that's going to be enacted into law. I mean, I would love to see. I mean, I've been a big proponent of people who are scammed by fortune tellers. They go to a fortune teller, and then next thing you know, have you had any bad luck recently? Anything bad happened to you? There's a curse on you. For $2,000, I can fix it. This stuff happens all the time.
Ooh, that's an interesting business.
Oh my God, yeah, it's the old gypsy tricks.
So it seems to me that one of the patterns that is emerging from your examples is actually the same pattern that emerges from when you look at pseudoscience in general. Regardless of whether we're talking about psychics, astrologers, people who believe in the singularity or whatever, the point is you make a vague prediction, right? And that way you have plausible deniability, at least in the minds of most people. The following question is well, why is it so many people do give plausible deniability to these kind of situations? I mean, the examples you gave earlier, I would think that nobody in his right mind would ever say, oh yeah, that sounds about like a reasonable defense of these things. It doesn't. So how is it that so many people do buy into the idea that, oh yeah, they got it almost right?
Well, part of it is that there's a couple reasons. One of them is that you have to remember that oftentimes we're dealing with grieving people. We're dealing with vulnerable people who their daughter's missing, their husband's missing. This is not an academic discussion, an abstract discussion about psychics. This person, if your family member is missing, you don't care where the information is coming from. Could it be true? Is it possible? Even if people don't believe in psychics, you know what? If the police aren't finding anybody and the searchers aren't finding anybody, what the hell? Why? If this person's coming to you and saying, like, I've solved these crimes, you can look at my book. I promise I'm not a convicted felon, despite what Ben Radford says.
I noticed that the other book is it's called The Psychic Case Files. It's very
very, very thin, and it's big type too. But that's part of it. Is that oftentimes when people are consulting psychic, I mean, look at it this way: if you're going to a psychic, you're looking for answers. You're looking for reassurance. You're asking someone else, basically a stranger, to give you answers that you don't have. And you're giving that person money and trust, and there's a emotional communication and connection. And so a lot of times, even if the person's information doesn't turn out to be true, they feel like, because the psychics tend to be genuine and sincere, they feel there's a connection. It's like, they don't want to think the person's lied to them. She did her best. No one's perfect. Even baseball sluggers don't get 100% of the time. There's all these comparisons that nobody's 100%, and so they will often believe that even though the information didn't lead to the person missing person being recovered, that the person tried. The person, she sat with me, she heard my story, and she tried. And so, there's not this. There's an interesting lack of anger and resentment towards that. I see it because I'm not involved in it. I see the exploitation, and sometimes I have to deal with the aftermath of that. But at the time, again, think about it. I mean, is my husband alive or dead? Is my daughter? Is she being held captive somewhere?
Right, but again, there seems to be. I mean, I'm convinced that what you're saying has definitely some relevance to the actual situation, but it can't be the whole story, because again, there are the situations when people actually do get upset by failure. For instance, the medical profession, right? Right, even though perhaps the doctor really did do whatever was possible, and the failure wasn't anybody's fault. Things just happen at some point or another, and yet people do sue, they get angry, and all that sort of stuff. It seems to me that there is a special category of exemption that some people are willing to make for things that are paranormal, mystical, out of this world, whatever the category is.
Yes, but there's another element here, which is that typically the people that are in the position to criticize the psychics aren't in the position to publicize it. It just so happened that the email that I got from Robin Gardner's boyfriend, who disappeared in Aruba, he was pissed off enough at Carla Baron to contact me and say, this woman screwed me over. TV show Haunting Evidence that I talked about. I got an email from someone, the family of a woman who was profiled on that, and said, you need to know that even though the TV show made us look like we were happy with her, she's a Fruit Loop. Nobody believed her. We were, on TV it looked like we're like, oh my God, this is so important. My point here is that if you're a missing person, if you're a family that has a member of the family who's missing, and the psychic doesn't help you, the last thing on your mind is calling the New York Times to complain about the psychic that didn't help. You got bigger issues because you're still looking for your loved one.
One more question. Speaking of the New York Times, so several times you mentioned major news outlets that consider themselves, at least most of the time, serious news outlets. CNN and NBC, blah blah. And yet, they go for these kind of things pretty regularly, it seems to me. Now, you mentioned that, of course, the obvious advantage there, or the obvious idea there is increasing ratings, because these things always happen in that case. But that can't be the whole story either, right? Because if it was just a matter of increasing ratings, I don't know, just broadcast some soft porn, that would get your ratings through the roof.
Probably.
Much more easily. So it can't be the only thing. Is it possible that perhaps journalists themselves typically are just not trained in critical thinking? They just fall for the same kind of stuff. I mean, you mentioned the gullible detectives, for instance, right?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's a couple of answers. One answer is that typically journalists who cover stories about psychics don't know anything about the subject. Right. They don't understand cold reading. They don't understand prediction, post-diction. They're assigned to the story. This missing person, the psychics give information, right, and they don't have the background to, unless they call me up or someone like you who can sort of say, okay, there's context to this that you need to understand. So this is why a lot of times you will see a headline on a news story that says psychic helps in investigation. That's the headline, psychic helps. And if you read the story, what they mean is a psychic gave information and the person is still missing. So by definition, the psychic didn't help anything. The psychic gave information. The person's still missing. The case has not been solved. But the headline, if you just read the headline, is psychic helps, and that's what the public takes home.
All right. I think we can open it up to the Q&A, which of course there are several people. So yes, go ahead.